1 year ago, the WNBA looked like it had finally solved the biggest problem in its history. Packed arenas, record television ratings, millions of new fans discovering the league for the first time. And at the center of that explosion was one name, Caitlin Clark. But behind the highlight reels, the sold-out arenas, and the viral social media clips, something very different was happening inside the league. Because according to insiders, the sudden explosion of attention around Caitlin Clark didn't just change the WNBA, it exposed tensions that had been quietly building for years. Locker rooms started having uncomfortable conversations. Veteran players began asking difficult questions. And suddenly, a league that looked more united than ever started showing signs of something very different. Division. Because the truth is, the so-called Caitlin Clark effect has created a complicated new reality inside the WNBA. A reality where opportunity, money, media attention, and power are all shifting at the same time, and not everyone is reacting the same way. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, the expectations were already enormous. Her college career had shattered viewership records. Millions of fans followed her every move. And for the WNBA, that level of attention represented something the league had been chasing for decades: mainstream visibility. Almost immediately, the effect was noticeable. Ticket prices surged, television ratings jumped. Entire arenas that once struggled to fill seats suddenly sold out when Clark's team came to town. From a business perspective, this was exactly what the league had always hoped for: a superstar capable of pulling massive audiences into women's basketball. But massive change rarely happens without consequences, because while fans celebrated the growth of the league, inside the WNBA, a deeper conversation was beginning. Who really benefits from this new era? Professional sports are built on stars. But when one star becomes dramatically bigger than everyone else, it can create an imbalance. And that's exactly the situation the WNBA suddenly found itself navigating. Caitlin Clark quickly became the most talked about player in the league. Her games received the most media coverage. Her highlights dominated social media, and brands rushed to align themselves with the new face of women's basketball. For younger fans discovering the league, Clark was the entry point. But for many veteran players who had spent years building the WNBA's foundation, the sudden shift in attention felt complicated. Players like Breanna Stewart and Nneka Ogwumike had been carrying the league through years when national attention was far more limited. They had fought for better salaries, better travel conditions, better exposure. And now, suddenly, the spotlight seemed to revolve around one rookie. This wasn't necessarily resentment, but it did create a new dynamic, a conversation about recognition, respect, and how the league tells its story. At the same time, on-court competition started feeding the growing narrative. One rivalry in particular captured massive attention. The matchups between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese quickly became some of the most watched games in the entire league. Fans debated every play, every foul, every post-game comment. Social media exploded with arguments about who deserved the spotlight. What had once been a simple basketball rivalry suddenly became something bigger, a symbol of the league's rapidly changing landscape. New fans versus longtime followers, new stars versus established veterans, and every viral moment only intensified the conversation. Behind the scenes, another factor made the situation even more complex: money. The WNBA has been growing steadily for years, but the sudden surge in popularity brought new financial discussions to the forefront. Players began asking important questions. If television ratings are rising, if arenas are selling out, if sponsorship interest is increasing, then how should that growth be shared across the league? The WNBA Players Association, led by figures like Nneka Ogwumike, has long pushed for improved compensation and working conditions, and the new surge of attention strengthened their argument. More visibility means more revenue potential. But negotiations around salaries, revenue sharing, and long-term investments are never simple. And as those conversations continued, the sudden spotlight created by Caitlin Clark only amplified the stakes. Another powerful force shaping the situation is media attention. When a league becomes the center of a national conversation, every moment becomes magnified. A hard foul becomes a headline, a heated exchange becomes a viral clip, and every disagreement can quickly be framed as something larger. This constant spotlight can create the illusion of conflict even when players themselves may simply be competing intensely on the court. But once a narrative starts spreading online, it takes on its own life. And the narrative that began forming around the WNBA was clear. Something big was happening inside the league. Growth pains. In reality, what the WNBA may be experiencing is something that nearly every growing sports league eventually faces. When popularity accelerates quickly, expectations rise just as fast. Players want a larger share of the league's success. Fans demand better broadcasts, bigger arenas, and more coverage. Sponsors expect the league to capitalize on the momentum, and league leadership must balance all of these pressures at once. The Caitlin Clark effect didn't create these challenges, it did accelerate them. Suddenly, the WNBA wasn't just growing, it was under a microscope. Despite the intense debates online, many players across the league continue to emphasize the same core goal: building the future of women's basketball. Veterans understand that increased attention helps the entire sport. Rookies recognize that they are entering a league built by players who fought for decades to reach this moment. And while disagreements may exist about the best path forward, the overall direction of the WNBA remains clear: growth, more fans, more opportunities, and a larger stage for women's basketball than ever before. The real question now is not whether the Caitlin Clark effect changed the WNBA. It clearly did. The real question is how the league will handle the pressure that comes with sudden success. Will the increased attention unite players around a common goal? Or will the rapid changes continue to create tension between different parts of the league? Because in professional sports, moments like this are turning points, and how a league responds can shape its future for years to come. One thing is certain: the WNBA is no longer flying under the radar. With stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese drawing millions of new viewers, women's basketball has entered a new era of attention and scrutiny. And as the league continues to evolve, the conversations happening today may ultimately define the next chapter of its history. So now the question shifts to the fans. Has the Caitlin Clark effect strengthened the WNBA or exposed deeper tensions that were always there? Let me know what you think, because the future of the league may depend on how this moment unfolds.